Hey everyone, I'm Louie. So I'm part of the fellow products group. We basically just focused in on housewares. So for my project brief, I kind of made the statement, how might we create a housewares consumer electronic that is a modern take on a retro technology? So let's break that down. It's kind of two areas that I used as guides for my project. First being consumer electronics and why. I just like it, and it's something that I want in my portfolio. And secondary, a modern take on a retro technology. And this is kind of a response to like the recent trend of people just like obsessing over older vintage retro technology. For instance, like flip phones, handy cams, cybershots, iPods. Maybe you've seen this. It's like a modern take on like a cassette player. So some of my initial ideation, I was originally inspired by like an alarm clock. So I tried to develop this a little bit further. Tried like a wall clock. Tried to see if I could like bring multiple elements, from a clock to scheduler to music player. But ultimately I kind of moved on from this for my final design. And I took these design cues, some like the form I kind of moved forward with, but in the end I kind of made one adjustment to this, and that was to make it more about the kitchen. And so that brings me to my final design, which is Rol-a-deck. So what is Rol-a-deck? It's your personal kitchen assistant. Here you can kind of see the product itself. So what does it do? Firstly, it organizes, stores, and generates recipes. This also kind of calls back to like what inspired this product, which is the classic cookbook, or even the Rolodex, which obviously I got the name from. It also can give you step-by-step cooking instructions. I like to think of it as like having a chef, leaning over your shoulder. And lastly, it can also help you plan your meal schedule. So obviously this doesn't replace your doctor or anything, but it can kind of just give you that nudge to make healthier decisions and plan that out. So who's it for? I like to break it down into kind of like two categories of people. The first being the enthusiast, which is someone who cooks regularly at home, cooks for the whole family, has recipes that were passed down to them that they cherish, someone who's really just about it and has knowledge. And the secondary person would be like, a complete novice, someone who doesn't eat at home, who doesn't even know the type of decisions to make in terms of what meals they should be eating or shouldn't be eating. And so here's a couple of scenarios that I've created to kind of like paint some pictures of what this user might look like. So I'll just read them off. Imagine Rol-a-deck guiding little Emma through her first attempt at baking cookies, setting timers perfectly so she never burns a batch. With Rol-a-deck, you can effortlessly scan Grandma's cherished apple pie recipe, ensuring it's preserved and easily accessible for every holiday gathering. Rol-a-deck helps Dad find healthy, delicious dinner ideas online, creating a balanced weekly meal plan that the whole family loves. So here's kind of my iteration process that I found this final form. And from there, I kind of developed a couple concepts for what different materials might look like. And I also wanted a clear version, so I kind of mapped out what the interior would look like. And that leads us to kind of these different material options. Personally, I'm a sucker for the clear translucent plastic. But like I said, it also gave me an opportunity to kind of map out what the interior might look like. So we got like a speaker, we got a couple different PCBs that would control like USB-C charging, a couple buttons, lithium battery, and a power switch. So about the buttons really quickly. The first would be kind of like a voice toggle. I imagine most of your interaction with this device is actually like through voice. Of course, you can do some touch screen elements, but it's mostly through voice. I guess you initiate your interaction with the product. And secondary, there's like a home/Bluetooth button, connects with your phone. You can play music. You can take pictures of old recipes, but also just kind of brings you to like the home zone of the interface. So like I said, it's mostly voice interactive. So I want to like give you a couple of examples of how you might start a conversation with the Rol-a-deck. Hey Rol-a-deck, show me some easy dinner recipes for tonight. Rol-a-deck, play some relaxing music while I cook. Can you add grandma's chocolate chip cookie recipe to my favorites? Rol-a-deck, what can I make with chicken and broccoli? Rol-a-deck, create a meal plan for the week with low carb options. And so what's left to do? I didn't get to do this just yet in my project, but I really want to mock up what the final interface would look like. I usually don't read sentences off the screen fully, but if you'll indulge me, I've got kind of a little description of a screen or two. For instance, the meal selection screen. The screen displays a variety of meal options with vibrant images and brief descriptions. Each option could include the meal name, a star rating, prep/cook time. The interface might also have a search bar at the top and filter options. Also got one for the step-by-step cooking. So mid-cooking, the screen shows the current step in large text at the top with a visual representation, like a stirring animation or ingredient image. Below that, there's a countdown timer for the current task with next step and previous step buttons. An optional voice guide button could also be visible. So I've got breakdowns for different screens for various things, but that's kind of my next phase with the project. But yeah, that's it. Would love any feedback. Might just ask that you step a little closer to the microphone so I can hear you properly. But thank you.
For the electronics, did you design that yourself? Or if you didn't, where did you get those assets? And what programs do you use for modeling and rendering?
I did it myself. I kind of just like mocked up just kind of like what I thought it might look like. You know, I'm not an electrical engineer or anything, but I just kind of tried to say, oh, maybe these are the parts I would need. And I used 3ds Max to create the models, and I took some like photos, 3ds Max and Substance Painter, to create the models. I created like little squares on it to be like little metal boxes and stuff. Then used some like photos of PCBs just to kind of like paint those textures onto it just to make it a little bit more realistic.
Thank you.
Other questions and comments? Anything to say there, Rula?
I think your presentation was really effective in kind of walking us through your entire thought process, and then especially for the form. I think once you start working on those screens or the actual UI, then that's when you can take one of those scenarios that you talked about, like grandma's chocolate chip, or I forget the exact scenario, but then you can kind of walk us through something like this where you showcase like the voice command or showing something on the screen, or like the step-by-step instructions, since that becomes really important in your project. So yeah, I would try to get to that as quickly as you can. But I mean, we kind of talked about this last week. I really like the overall form and inspiration and the general idea for the project of having like a personal cooking assistant for people who are really into those retro inspired design. So yeah, I think as your final project for undergrad, you did a really nice job. And the personas that you had was also helpful to kind of get us to gauge who we were targeting.
Okay, so I also like the overall approach. I think it came out great, especially like the rocker switch underneath on the bottom angle. It just looks cool, right? So, but I do have a couple of like suggestions, and I can be pretty specific since you were very detailed in what you showed. So Rolodeck to me sounds like it's taking me somewhere I don't want to go. Deck doesn't mean anything in this context. So I think Rolo Chef would be better. Keep the Rolo because I get it, but change it to Rolo Chef so that I know what the product is for. I think your speaker grill isn't as interesting as it could be. I think you could tell us something with that speaker grill. I don't know what you would tell us, but that particular grill refers to deck more than cooking. Like it looks like an old radio, and I'm not sure I want something that I cook with or whatever to just be a radio on the wall. Um, graph. Oh, you have some graphics on the front of the box that say Rolodeck, and they're actually on a downward facing surface. So I don't think anybody would ever see those graphics. So I think you have to rethink where you put those graphics. They just wouldn't be visible unless you mounted it really high on the wall, which I don't think is a good idea. And then the last thing I have is that I'm not getting a really good sense of how big everything is. I know you have this picture with it on the wall, and you have another picture of it sitting on a counter, but I think you got to put something in that counter shot to give me a better sense of scale, a pencil or something, something that everybody knows how big it is, a spoon or something. I don't know. So that's it.
Cool. Yeah, maybe I can do some like in hand type renders that really just shows like next to a hand to show like the scale. And as far as like the text, I was trying to take like a page almost out like, and same with the speaker grill, kind of like the Braun Dieter Rahm's book of design, and try to like, having the logo on there wasn't like, I didn't want it like front and center just because you have these other elements. I wanted to seem minimalistic. I don't necessarily want you to have to stare at it all day and see that logo on there, but tried to put it in a way where it's still somewhat visible but not like in your face.
Yeah, so what I would do then is I would just emboss it into the surface.
Okay.
And make it less graphic. So you're kind of giving me contradictory information. You're saying, hey, look at this by having a high contrast, but then you say, hey, don't look at this, right? So I think you just got to go one way and say, just make it really subtle, and then it'll look intentional.
Cool. Yeah, I'll give it a go.
Great.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks.